Carbon markets are for tackling the negative externalities of our existence on this planet. What we do commercially and in our daily lives has a negative impact on our environment.
All kinds of theoretical discussions, and the Earth is warming, global warming is going to cause damage, and there is risk and we need to address it. But I think the difference between when that was being said in the 90s and still now to an extent is that we're actually seeing the damage.
Well, it really chills the blood when you see the pace and scale of change. Huge amounts of ice had melted. And the scientists really had genuinely, I know there's a lot of hype about this, but they had tears in their eyes thinking of what this meant.
Carbon markets or environmental markets are mechanisms that we've developed over the last 20, 30 years of economic thinking that can help use market mechanisms to challenge and address and redress some of these problems.
And it's really the way of the future, and carbon will be a commodity, and carbon will be the largest commodity market in the world. It could even be its own asset class.
And I believe that carbon markets, being such a global and common dilemma, are also a global and common opportunity.
Economics is about the allocation of scarce resources, and that's why we have a price mechanism. So what is the scarce resource that we are actually trying to allocate here? It's the amount of space left in the atmosphere for further concentrations of greenhouse gases.
So it's going to take time for companies to actually do the energy transition, decarbonize. And so they're going to buy offsets. So I see actually the biggest commodity market we've ever seen starting to mature, and this is real and material.
World population will start growing to, let's say, 10 billion people in 2050. So we need to double the food production. And on the other hand, we need to at least halve our emissions. So we need to become 4 times as ecologically efficient. And we can only do that by really changing the food system. But that comes at a price. And that price is external to the system, so we need to internalize that price. That's putting a price to carbon in order to make the change happen.
Today, there are alternatives to allow participation at a very local and global level through the end-to-end supply chains, financing, verification, and governance. And so there is a moral and financial obligation to do this right.
We have 65 mandated carbon markets in the world, and the voluntary market, which right now is quite small. It passed $1 billion last September, according to Ecosystem Marketplace, but is sized by most analysts at least to $95 to $100 billion by 2030.
That's a fantastic thing, because we really in 25 years have not come up with a better mechanism for taking money out of corporate pockets and putting it against some of the negative externalities that corporates and our behaviour on this planet have created. That's the sharp reality, is that it's a market mechanism that catalyses new behaviours that just simply wouldn't take place in its absence. And this is really the fundamental argument for carbon markets, is that what's the alternative? Because taxes are avoided and rules are ignored. Carbon markets are not perfect, but they've been a long time in development and have had great impacts and can be improved upon.
More broadly, there's kind of 3 parts to building high integrity voluntary carbon markets. Number 1, you have to know that carbon credits are doing what they say on the tin, and having a definitive global threshold for high quality carbon credits will allow that to happen. To know that credits do what they say, that these are credits of very high integrity. That's number 1. Number 2, transparency, which gives confidence in pricing, right? Are these credits being priced effectively? High quality credits that trade in a market that's based on rigorous standards and has good market infrastructure are going to allow that to happen. And with good pricing and assurance around integrity, that enables these credits to be effectively used by the companies that are using them in their path toward net zero. And the third piece, it really, goes back to the question of what is a legitimate claim of progress toward net zero. If you have these standards in place, then buyers can make legitimate claims using credits based on accepted standards as part of a credible net zero pathway.
Lots of development underway. I think the function of the carbon markets for offsets is going to continue to grow, and it needs to be underpinned again by real projects that are investable, but I'm quite bullish about it.
Because it's a slow process. It can be a very rewarding process, both in the output of what you achieve and also financially. The best projects take time, and they take time because it takes time to prove credibility. So, I think if you're saying to me, what do we need to do? We need to keep at it, we need to scale it, and we need to be patient with it. But it is all about problem, We all created this issue of our planet that we live in. It's about tackling our existence.